Right now, the world is exhausted. 1 in 3 adults is chronically sleep deprived, and for Gen Z, that number sits closer to 93%. A massive portion of this deficit comes from a hidden epidemic, obstructive sleep apnea. It is a condition where a person repeatedly stops breathing during the night, and it is now as biologically prevalent worldwide as diabetes, with up to 1 billion people suffering, mostly undiagnosed. Looking at the fluctuating lines on this vintage EEG paper readout, we can see the physical disruption happening inside the brain. These invisible breathing stoppages constantly yank the mind out of the deep sleep required to clear out waste and repair cellular structures, even while the patient appears to be resting. Yet instead of addressing the underlying biology of why we are so tired, society is attempting to cure this profound crisis with blind guesswork and dangerous assumptions. We rely heavily on the cultural myth that everyone requires exactly 8 hours of unbroken rest. When we fall short, we try to game the system by binge sleeping on the weekends, which completely misaligns our internal clocks. Then we turn to unregulated, over-the-counter melatonin gummies. Melatonin is a hormone, yet it is sold like candy. High doses can cause vivid nightmares, and in developing youths, it can even act as a contraceptive, altering hormonal development in ways we rarely acknowledge. To force ourselves to wind down, many use alcohol as a nightly sedative. While a drink might induce unconsciousness, it actively destroys the brain's glymphatic system during stage 4 sleep. That is the exact mechanism responsible for clearing out the proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. True rest is impossible as long as we treat sleep as a simple off switch, something to be brutally forced down by pills and toxins, instead of a biological process to be managed. To actually fix how we rest, we have to understand the body's two-system engine. The first half is the sleep drive, a pressure mechanism entirely powered by a chemical called adenosine. This diagram illustrates how sleep drive builds up. As your cells burn energy throughout the day, adenosine accumulates. It works its way through your system and locks into specific receptors in your brain, gradually inducing heavier and heavier drowsiness. Caffeine does not actually provide you with new energy. Its molecular shape is simply so close to adenosine that it mimics it, allowing caffeine to hijack and block these exact receptors, so the sleepiness cannot register. This biological quirk allows for an exploit called the nappa latte. By rapidly drinking a cup of black coffee and immediately taking a 25-minute nap, you give your brain time to clear out the existing adenosine before the caffeine digests and kicks in. This perfectly times the caffeine's arrival to lock into a freshly emptied brain. You maximize your chemical alertness and get hours of focus without the severe crash. The second half of the engine is your sleep rhythm. This is your internal circadian clock, governed by the delicate balance of 2 hormones, cortisol to wake you up and melatonin to put you to sleep. When you wake up, your brain is flooded with a natural spike of cortisol. If you drink coffee immediately, you are essentially adding a weak stimulant on top of a powerful one. Waiting 90 minutes allows that waking cortisol spike to naturally drop before you introduce caffeine, yielding a much stronger, sustained effect. The exact timing of those hormone spikes isn't a choice. It is determined by genetic chronotypes, hardwired codes that dictate exactly when your brain will naturally release these sleeping and waking chemicals. This chart compares the daily hormone release curves of an early rising lion chronotype against a night-dwelling wolf. Because the lion's cortisol starts flowing at dawn, their peak cognitive performance hits early in the morning, while the wolf's peak data points are misaligned by several hours, hitting maximum creativity long after the sun goes down. When you overlay a rigid 9-to-5 corporate schedule onto this data, you can see it completely misses the wolf's peak cognitive window. Forcing them to adhere to standard business hours is a losing battle against their own genetic code. This biological rhythm also explains the universal glitch of waking up at 3 in the morning. It happens due to a predictable evolutionary collision between our sleep rhythm and our core body temperature. During the night, your core temperature drops to signal the release of melatonin, but if it keeps dropping, you would freeze. So between 1 and 3 in the morning, your body automatically spikes its temperature to prevent hypothermia, which momentarily wakes you up. The first rule of surviving this awakening is simple: do not stand up to go to the bathroom. Moving from a lying position to a standing position violently spikes your heart rate, instantly signaling your brain that it's time to be active. This graph illustrates the absolute biological threshold for sleep. In order to successfully re-enter a state of unconsciousness, the brain requires a heart rate below 60 beats per minute. The exact moment you transition from horizontal to vertical, your heart rate spikes from a resting 50 up to 85 beats per minute, destroying that threshold. Overcoming this 3 a.m. glitch isn't about angrily forcing the brain to sleep. It is entirely about using breathing techniques and stillness to manually lower the heart rate back into the sleep zone. We need to discard the myth that a sleeping brain is turned off. When you close your eyes, your mind actually enters an intensely active state of processing, firing rapidly in the dark. Dreams function as emotional metabolism. They are a nightly biological mechanism designed to safely digest trauma, work through daytime anxieties, and process complex emotions so you can function the next day. If we constantly interrupt this metabolic process with bad habits, extreme stress, or alcohol, we fail to digest those experiences. We accumulate immense emotional weight and crippling cognitive fatigue over time. Ultimate sleep mastery is achieved by respecting the biological engine you already have. By aligning with your unique rhythm and protecting your sleep drive, you allow your body to perform the exact recovery it was designed for.
NutriCure Wellness, inspired by nature, driven by science.